Hello there, fishy people. Today I'm going to do a light review of three cheapish Chinese LED lights for your aquarium. It's by no means the cheapest option, but it's the cheapest option I could find without going the DIY route. If you're into DIY, you can go cheaper. You can take normal LED light bulbs, take off a bulb part and mount it on top of your aquarium, or you can even use security spotlights. I'm going to leave a link for you in the description. There's a good video that McMarvis has made about modifying LED light bulbs, and then of course MD Fish Tanks there in the UK. He also does a lot of innovative DIY with his lighting. Now I've got two left hands, so I'm not going to do that. I want something that's plug and play, and these are three. I don't want to say cheap, because if you're over R1,000 on some of these, then already it's no longer cheap, but it's the more affordable range, and especially for nano tanks, then it really isn't expensive. So we're going to do these three different lights. First we're going to do the Nubios. That's more something that works for nano tanks. And then we're going to have an in-between one, which is a no-name brand. It's simply called DLD D, and then the number of a size. I suspect, if I look at its features and some online reviews, it is a Chinese rip-off of Haiger lights that they have in America that I haven't really seen here. I suspect it's sort of a copy of that sort of light. And then the third one is a bigger light. You get them in 60 centimeters and 120 centimeters. It can fit up to 140 centimeters. And that's the Neo-Helios freshwater full spectrum plant light. Now, if you guys just hold on, I'm going to run around to the tanks, and I'm going to quickly show you what the lights look like, what the effect is on the aquarium itself. Okay guys, so here's the Nubios. It's on a 30 centimeters cube. This is the second smallest one in the range. You get one that's smaller if you don't need a lot of light. But you can see it's a simple light. It gives off a cool white light, and it's more than adequate to grow these plants. I've recently redone the cube. You can see it's got Java fern and Aquanice. They've been newly planted from little plantlets on my Java fern leaves in the main tank, and tiny little crypts, but they're already growing after a month. So it does seem to do the job. And that's where it's at. It's a simple clip light like that. Okay guys, now this one over here is the DLD series no-name Chinese LED light. And it's on full blast now at its highest setting. And this is what it looks like on my tank. It's a tank that is a bit deeper from back to front. When your normal tank, it's 40 centimeters, not the standard foot depth of a standard tanks. But this is what the light looks like when it's on the tank. I switched off the air pumps here and have to listen to a buzz. Nice crisp light. I usually keep it 2 settings lower, on for 6 hours a day. Otherwise the algae gets a bit out of hand. And that's what it looks like on the tank. As you can see, there's 2 on, because it's a bit deeper. As I've said, if I take one off and I only have one on the tank, I move it to the middle now. You can see what I found. It tends to, you can put it in the center. And it works. If you're going to have very low light plants, it's not going to be a problem. If a tank is only 30 centimeters, 1 foot from back to front, a single light will be completely fine. But this extra 5 centimeters on both sides tends to give you shady spots there. So that's why I use 2 on this particular tank. Okay, now over here, this is the Neo-Helios Aquanice one on a 4-foot tank. And as you can see, this 4-foot tank is not the standard height from bottom to top. It's quite a bit higher than your standard 4-foot. It's helped on a bit because the substrate is deep, but still it's more than 35 centimeters from the bottom or top of a substrate to the surface. I would say it's about 45 centimeters, at least about 50 centimeters, 50, maybe more, because the tank's height is 70 centimeters from where you see the silver frame at the bottom to where the water stops under the top rim. So it takes the light in quite deep. It's on full blast, and it's on for about 8 hours a day. And as you can see, does a very good job of lighting this tank. And this tank is 42 centimeters from back to front, and there's only the one here. It's a broader light, and it covers more area for your bigger tanks. Okay guys, so this is the Neo-Helios. This is a great tank for nano tanks. It's simple in terms of spectrum. It simply has, this particular one is 8 watts of cool white fluorescent lighting, but it does have a very nice sturdy clip, and you can also adjust it so that if you have it on your tank and the tank is a bit further, a bit broader from end to end or longer, you can simply tilt it like that and it will spread the light more. I found this is ideal for 30 centimeter long nano cube like the one I've got here. You've got one then that is 30 centimeters long. I think that would work well for a 1.5 foot tank or standard 10-gallon tank. And there's also a 40 centimeters long one if you need a bit more light in that 10-gallon tank, that 1.5 foot tank. That will also be ideal. And I think about the maximum tank size for these lights would be a 2-foot tank, 60 centimeters. What is that in gallons? About 12 or 15 gallons. And then I would tilt it a little bit like that. If you go bigger, you're going to have to use a couple of these and put them like that on the back of a tank. I think that starts looking a bit slapdash, not so neat to me. So then I'll go for one of the other options. The build quality is quite sturdy. It's nothing fancy. It's just a hard sort of plastic, but it's not flimsy. You know, it's quite tough and it's quite durable. And as far as settings go, that's the one thing that you don't have here. It's simple. It's just on and off. And it's got a normal switch like your bed lamp. Nothing fancy. So it just switches on and off. Of course, you can put it onto a timer if Eskom doesn't really go up with that. So it's a simple light. It's a sturdy light. Prices begin at about 190 Rand, 220 Rand for this one here. And when it maxes out at 320 Rand, and that's for a 40 centimeter long 12 watt light. That'll be, if you have a planted 1.5 foot 10-gallon tank, will be ideal for that. I think if you tilt the light a little bit, you can stretch it to 60 centimeter to a 2-foot tank. But I think that's as far as you're going to go with a single one of these. So there you are. So there's a nice range for all your nano tanks up to 2 foot. And the price range there, 190 to 320 Rand, and 6 watt to 12 watt. So cheap light, sturdy though, good value for money. I like it. I've had good results of this one, and this tank has been up and running. You can look on my channel. There is another video of this cube tank when it had aqua soil and it had a lot more plants in. And that was a little while back. I had to break it down when the aqua soil started breaking down. But it's still the same light, and the plants, even though I re-evolving, are growing nicely. Okay, now we have a DLD version. As I've said, it's a no-name brand. It just says DLD, a dash, and then a D and a number for the size. If I look at what it can do, I think it's a rip-off of a Haiger, but this is what you get here in South Africa. It's got a simple on and off switch. But it's got a lot more than the Nubios that I just showed you. The switch is something that I like here. Of course, you've got a timer switch. and the switch goes from 4 hours, I think it's 4 hours if I can read correctly there. I haven't got my reading glasses on. Three hours to 6 hours to 12 hours. You've got those three timer options. So if you switch it on, I put mine on 6 hours, and that's a green one. Then I know in 6 hours the light's going to switch itself off. And if I just leave it plugged in like that at the same time the next day, it's going to switch on again and switch off after 6 hours. So that's one big plus. It has got a sort of a rudimentary timer in it. And as you can see, it's more of a full spectrum LED. It's got the white, the cool white, the blue and the red lights. And you can change these lights if you're one of those that want a night setting where it gives you that moonlight setting with the red. You can have it. Just don't keep it on all the time. The plant's going to need a bit more. But if you don't like that, you can also just have a white setting. Then it's just a plain white setting like the Nubios. And the plants grow equally well with that. So that will work with the plants. I've tried both. And this will work also. I just think if you have all the lights on, it just shows off the colors a little bit better. Now the other thing that I like about it is the build quality. It's quite sturdy, and you've got these little brackets that can move in and out. This one can sit on a tank of 75 to I think 90 centimeters. This is the 750 in the series, and this light sets you back 765 Rand. 765, that's a lot more expensive, especially if like me you're going to put two on the tank. But it can do a lot more than the Nubios. It's not quite that basic. It is sturdy, and I like the switch. The switch gives you some options, and it also has a timer. Now what I don't like about the light, I think with the bracket being the way it is, it doesn't have that option of giving you a height. You can quite easily do it by putting a little block there on your tank's rim and just lift it yourself. It's a very simple bit of DIY to do it. I think if you lift it a bit higher off the tank that I've got it on from the top of the substrate to where the water surface is about 35 centimeters. So it's not that high. It's a high tank, but it's taken up by the substrate. So it's not that deep from the surface to the bottom. I get confused between what is high and deep now these days, front to back, bottom to top. But I suspect if you lift it a bit higher off the tank, then it will spread a little better. But it's fine for any tank that's only a foot from back to front. If it's only 30 centimeters from back to front, you're definitely not going to need more than one of these. It's just when the tanks grow bigger, and then the way I use it, I have to use more. But I do suspect if I used it on my tank downstairs, a big one that's got the Nubios on, because it's a much higher tank, I do think the light will spread out a bit more. So that's the only thing that I got with this, but I think it doesn't really relate to a product. It more relates to my particular setup. So that's the only gripe I can have, is that you don't have that options of height if you're struggling to spread the light. You know, it can tend to spotlight. But if you just have, let's say, your standard 3-foot tank or 2-foot tank, it's a great option. And their prices, it also starts, there's a small 30 centimeter model that you can use on the cube here that I've just shown you, but that sets you back 385 Rand as opposed to 220 for the Nubios. But you have that option for nano tanks, and it goes all the way up to 4 foot. And the big one, the 4-foot one, is going to set you back 1,040. 1,040 if you compare lights for a 4-foot tank or 1.2 meter tank, it's still not too bad. It's still not too bad. It's not, you can do it much cheaper with spotlights and with DIYing a series of LED light bulbs. You can do it a lot cheaper. But off the shelf for a 4-foot tank, you're going to struggle to be better than 1,040. The question would just be, will it spread out enough from back to front? That's my question. So any of you guys that have experience with these lights, let me know in the comment sections. Did you hang it? Did you get it a bit higher from the substrate? What did you guys do? If you use the deeper substrates like I do, that makes it a bit shorter from bottom to top, then I do find if it's more than 40 centimeters from back to front, it tends to spotlight a little bit. But I like the build quality on these lights, and I like the switch. That's really two things I like. It's a nice middle of the range option that you've got here. Okay, and here we're back to the big daddy, the Neo-Helios. Now this is that full spectrum LED light. You can see there in the reflection of the glass covers, it not only has the cool white, the red, the blue, it also has the green in it. And if I look at it in terms of light output, these three lights that we're talking about, and if I'm just looking at the actual delivering of a product, delivering a light that will make your fish look good and will give your plants optimum growth, I think this one is the best. It emits the best light out of the three, I think, quite clearly. And that is what I like about it. You can see it's got a similar bracket to the DLD version. It also slides in here and it's quite adjustable, and it sits on this bracket. I would have preferred the one that's bent like the DLD and not this little plastic bracket, but that doesn't bother me too much. Now, what I don't like about these, what the pity is, but it's cheap sort of plastic, the cover there, it is a little bit flimsy. The build quality could really have been better. It's not as sturdy as the other two lights. You're going to break this one easier. But having said that, if you don't have toddlers who's going to climb up on top of a tank, or cats that are going to play on top of your tank, it shouldn't be that big a problem. If you handle it with the necessary care, there's no reason why you should break it just in the normal everyday care. It just feels a little flimsy. But my big bugbear with this light, the unfortunate thing, is the switch. Now, it's one of these touch switches. One touch changes the settings. Now it's completely off. Now it's on a setting where you don't have a blue light. And when you're on this setting, you've got a dimmer. If I put my finger there and I keep it there, it goes brighter, which is nice. We have that same setting also on the DLD lights. You can set the brightness of it. And if I keep my finger on it again, it dims. Right, and I can simulate dusk for the fish, so they can adjust to the light. And then if I tap it again, now I've got the moonlight effect. Don't know if you can see there all the reflections, but that doesn't matter. And if I tap it again, it goes on to a full one again. When I want it to go off, and I have to tap it again, and now it's off. And now it's back on its full spectrum. So the switch, I find it very finicky. I much prefer the DLD version where all your options on the switch are clear and you have those different buttons. It can do different spectrums, and not quite as wide a spectrum as this one, but you can dim, you can set a timer, which this one doesn't have, and you can have different options, different light options. It's got a slightly better spectrum light. Price wise, the Neo-Helios will set you back a bit more. This one that you see here for a 4-foot tank, you can stretch it with those brackets to put on a 1.4. Usually the next step up is a 1.5, so that's also something that doesn't make logical sense, at least not here in South Africa. But this one is going to set you back just under 1,400 Rand. I've seen them ranging between 1,395 and 1,495. And then there is also a smaller one, a smaller version of this Neo-Helios that is for a 60 centimeter tank, and that is 880 Rand as opposed to the 645 Rand that the DLD is going to set you back. So it is a slightly more pricey light. I think it does produce a better light. If we just want the best light that's going to get you the best plant growth, I think the big one, the Neo-Helios, for your bigger tanks, 60 centimeters and up. I haven't seen it on the in-between ranges. I don't know if I make it. That's what I've seen here in South Africa. The light is what I like there. So I'll keep it on my 4-foot tank. I can use the DLD, the bigger brother. That's a little bit cheaper on the 4-foot tank. But I'm not quite sure if I'm not going to have to DIY it a little bit to get the light to spread, to lift it a bit off the tank or get a second light. If I do that, because the tank is 42 centimeters from back to front, then it becomes a more expensive option. And then we've got the Neo-Helios. Now, what do I think about these lights? What's the verdict? I think if you're keeping little nano tanks of 1 foot to about 2 foot, then I would go for the more simple Nubios light, or if you have, let's say, breeding shrimp or keeping bettas, Siamese fighters. I think this light is very, very good value for money. The timing thing you can always overcome. You can just connect it to a timer, but it doesn't have on fancy settings. But for the rest, it's a perfectly good light. If you just want a light that you can plug and play for your nano tanks, it's a good option. Now the DLD lights, as I said, I like the switch, I like the build quality, and that's a slightly more expensive option if you're going to use it for your nano tanks up until about a 2-foot tank. But I think they will work equally as well as far as the results go, and you'll have a bit more color options. So if you want to use these on your nano tanks, they're a better option than the Nubios. You just have to decide for yourself in those nano ranges if what you get from the light. You can go back in the video and compare. If you like the look of a light more, I think it is neater and it is a more versatile light, and if it's worth that bit extra that you pay for it, I think it's also a good light. The Neo-Helios, as I said, I'll keep it on my 4-foot tank. I'm getting really good results on it. I just wish, as one so often does, maybe we fish keepers need to get together and do some product development that you can combine the best of both. It's sort of like the Aqua Clear and the Tidal Seachem hang-on back filters. There's stuff that I like on both and there's stuff that I don't like on both. And if one could only combine it, if I could just put the bolt, if I could leave a light as it is, the performance of a light on that D10 Neo-Helios, if I can leave that performance, I can get that as it is, but with the build quality and the switch of a DLD, I'd be very happy. But that all costs, of course, set you back more. That's, of course, why it is a reasonably priced, because they skimp on the build quality. But that finicky switch is a real pain in the backside. But it's not something that is that you are unable to overcome. You can just leave it in that setting. You can set it on a normal timer. Then you don't have that finicky dimming and everything with your hands. And it will work perfectly fine if the room lights are on before the lights go on. It's just, I think, the idea of that switch was good, but it's just too finicky and it doesn't work in the right sequence. I don't know if it's maybe this one that's dud, but I do find that switch very annoying, very finicky. So I would have loved to combine the design, the slightly higher design, and the light output and the build quality of these two lights. And then I think one would have a winner. But so that's it. They all have their pros and cons. The price ranges of these three lights start from $190 going all the way up until $1,400, $1,395 is what I bought this from. I think they're R100 more expensive now. So that's a price range that you have. Now, these are the lights that I use. These are what I found, unless you're talking small nano lights. You can get one from here and there from Take-A-Lot that's a bit cheaper, but like 10 Rand or so. It doesn't get much cheaper when 190 is what you pay for the smallest version of a Nubios. They're all very usable lights, but don't have to absolutely break the bank. So that's what I think of these three lights. Tell me in the comment section if you guys have had experience with these and what they were. There are higher end lights as well. Of course, we have the Fluval plant that I have yet to see in South Africa. And we have, those are lights that can go from your Wi-Fi. And you have a Z light, of course, and then you have the big daddy of all of them that cost the price of a car almost. I'm joking, second-hand car for sure. And that's of course the ADA lights. But those are your high-end lights. I haven't used them yet. I'm more still about keeping fish and keeping plants, but I do like to keep the plants more and more and more. So I want something at least the low light, more beginner type plants that I have. Amazon swords, Vallis, Cryptocorinnes, Java moss, Java fern, and Nubios can grow under, and they more than do the job for that. So let me know what you think, and please remember to like and subscribe if you sat through all of this. And until we see each other again, keep enjoying fish keeping.